Hey, welcome back everyone. In this episode of my prog rock show, I'm going to delve a little bit into my collection here and take a look at 10 prog rock CDs that I will probably never open. And I'll talk about why. Alright, so I know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking that CDs are meant to be open, they're meant to be listened to. And when I bought these CDs, I had every intention of listening to them, but things get in the way, you get distracted. You buy other things that take priority or precedence over the things that you bought before. And before you know it, you have a load of CDs that you haven't opened. A lot of them I probably will get to, but I want to take a look at 10 that I will never open. So let's delve in. Alright, let's start off with the first one. It's going to be Kayak. I want to start off with a fun fact about Kayak. Kayak is actually a palindrome, which means that it's spelled the same forward as it is backwards. I'm sure that piques your interest already. And can you think of another band that is also a palindrome? Starts with A, has two B's in the middle, ends with another A. Alright, anyway, I do have the first three Kayak albums that were released by Esoteric, one being CC the Sun, which I don't recommend unless you want to do major damage on your eyes, their self-titled album, Kayak, and my personal favorite, Royal Bed Bouncer. Love this album. But I wanted some more albums that Esoteric didn't release, and I think it was 2020, Universal released the first 5 albums called The First 5, and it included The Last Encore and Starlight Dancer. I had every intention of opening this up, and then when I thought about getting to it, I looked it up online and it was like impossible to get. So therefore I held off on it. Which is sad because it also comes with a bonus CD, a 6 CD that has A and B side singles on it. So I would have loved to listen to this album, but hard to find. If you can find it, great. Used copy might be cheap, but to get it still in the plastic would probably be almost impossible. Okay, on to the next. So, the prog band Neuschwanstein, which is actually a German prog rock band, came out with 2 albums. Now, the first one I did open, which is Alice in Wonderland. And this is basically an instrumental album that has narration, but the narration is in German. Although, I still like to listen to this and play with puppets that were crocheted by my cousin for my daughter. In 1979, they came out with their second album, which was called Battlement. Now this one I did not open. This is the museum version of this, and as you can see, it's still in the plastic. And I've listened to a little bit of this on YouTube, and the lead singer sounds exactly like Peter Gabriel. Alright, it's like a dead ringer for Peter Gabriel. I've never heard anybody actually sing. I've heard people sing kind of like him, but you would actually think it's Peter Gabriel singing this album. This is actually, from what I've heard, fantastic. The musicianship on here is awesome. The keyboards, everything, great symphonic rock. Now, at the time of talking about this, I actually did order a version, a Japanese version, which was a little bit more expensive from Valentique. And I'll probably bring this up again in the video. So I will probably open that version, but it's definitely a little pricier, but it's something that you can pick up. As far as Alice in Wonderland goes, they actually did redo this in 2022, and it's narrated by Sonia Christina from Curved Air, and I like Sonia Christina. So a little while back, I talked about 10 progressive rock instrumental albums that were on the obscure side of things, and one of the bands that I talked about was Dice. And I talked about the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and I actually showed this particular CD. And this was actually a radio recording that was done live in 1977, and it actually goes through the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and also includes a couple songs from their only real album that they released in the 70s. As I talked about, the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse was actually released in the early 90s. So this has Annika and also the Venetian Bargain as well from their first album. Now, I think I got this album off of Doug Larson Imports, if I can remember correctly. This was released by Bella Antique, and it's, as you can see, a Japanese version, and I could never find this anyplace else. I've had this for long enough. I will probably never open it. It's just going to stay in the plastic, and I'll just be curious about how everything sounds on the inside. Automatic Man, and this is an album I think I've seen on the background of some other prog YouTube channels. This was actually formed with Michael Shreve from Santana, and Todd Cochran was the lead singer and the keyboardist of this band as well, and he was definitely the front man of the band. And this is a fantastic album, their debut album. It's actually one of my favorites. I listen to this one a lot. So Michael Shreve actually left the band after this, and their bass player left as well, Donnie Harvey. Pat Thrall, their guitarist, actually stuck around for the second album. And of course I've opened this one, but what I haven't opened was their second album, which is Visitors. And very much the same looking album, just a red background as you can see here. And both of these were released by Cherry Red Records or Lemon Recordings, which might be a division of theirs. I'm not exactly sure how it works. Esoteric Records is actually a part of all that as well. And this one again was tough to find. I think I found it, if I remember correctly, on eBay from someone in Italy, and it came in perfect condition, sealed, no cracks, no nothing. And since this one again is almost impossible to find on CD, I will probably never open it. And if they do re-release it, I'll probably open that version, but I won't open this one. Okay, let's talk about Flash. So I talked a little bit about Flash in my Advent calendar videos that nobody ever watched a couple Christmases ago. And of course they were formed by Peter Banks, who had been a member of Yes, the guitarist for them, who was replaced after their second album by Steve Howe. Also Tony Kaye, keyboardist for Yes, plays on the first album. But I'm not talking about the first album, I already talked about that. I'm talking about the third album, which is Out of Our Hands, which apparently is kind of a concept album. Now the three Flash albums that did come out in the early 70s were released by Esoteric Records on CD. And I was planning on getting to this, I never opened it. And now trying to find it online, again, it's almost impossible to find, or you'd probably have to pay a pretty hefty price for it. So therefore I decided not to open it. So this was the last album again to come out from the original Peter Banks version of the album. They would reform much later without Peter Banks. But again, this will probably stay sealed in my collection. Okay, the next one I want to talk about is Gracious's first album, which is called Gracious with an exclamation point at the end of it. And I talked about this band in a previous video, the Connecting the Dots video that I did a little while back. It was one of my favorite videos that I've done. And I talked about how this band Gracious was in the Isle of Wight very early on. They didn't last too long. They only did 2 albums. So this particular version I will never open. This was actually released by Repertoire Albums, and it's kind of a cool replica because it actually has a texture to it. So I'm assuming that the original LP also was textured. I don't know, I've actually never encountered it. So if you know, you can write about it in the comments section below. Now I have listened to this. In fact, BGO had released both their albums on CD. So the first album again being Gracious, the second one being This Is Gracious with 2 exclamation points. After this, the band was done. I assume that if they had come out with a third album, they would have incorporated 3 exclamation points in the title. Julian's Treatment was another band that I had covered in my Advent calendar a couple years ago, and I talked about the album a time before this. And this was basically done by Julian J. Savarin, who was Dominican born, who ended up moving to Britain. He was a keyboardist and he was also a science fiction writer. And if you want to learn more about this album, you can watch that video. And it's definitely a concept album. Now, in 1971, he came out with the follow-up under his name, Julian J. Savarin, called Waiters on the Dance. And I have not listened to any of this. Also a concept album. Also science fiction based, also progressive. But this was actually very hard to find to begin with. So right from the get-go, I figured I would probably never open this album. And this was also an esoteric release as well. So I am definitely curious about it, but it's going to stay in the plastic for now. Julian J. Savarin would not do any more albums, but he would continue to write books in the science fiction genre. Wigwam, a Finnish band that came out with their third album in 1971, Fairyport. I think it was originally a double album. This particular version was actually released by Esoteric Records, and it was released in 2010, and I've had this for a while. I've opened this one up, I've listened to it, but I noticed that there's actually another version of this album out there that had a bonus track on it, and that would be this version right here, which was actually released in 2003, and it's under Love Records, which was their original label that they released albums on. And also this was released under the Siboney label, it looks like, as well. So the bonus track on here was a live version of Losing Hold and Finlandia, and being the completist that I am, I went out and I grabbed this, and I thought that I would open it at some point, but now actually both these CDs are actually pretty hard to find. And Wigwam is a great progressive rock band, and the one after this, which is Being, I like probably as much as this one. This was probably the first one of their real progressive period that they did. Very keyboard driven, a lot of great melodies, and I definitely recommend them if you can find them. Definitely grab these albums. Okay, if you've watched any of my other videos, you may know that Illusions on a Double Dimple by Triumvirate, a German keyboard-driven trio progressive band. Insert your Emerson, Lake and Palmer likenesses here. Anyways, I'm not here to talk about this album. I actually want to talk about the follow-up to that. Is 1975 Spartacus. Now, this version that I have here was actually released by EMI in 2002, but a year later, Friday Music actually released a deluxe edition of this, and I knew this existed. I had seen it, like used copies on Amazon, basically almost impossible to find. I wanted to find a new copy, and within the last year I actually found someone who was selling this for an extremely reasonable price on eBay, so I had to pick it up. So what this offers is actually bonus tracks that were live versions of 4 songs from the Spartacus album. I thought that was great. I really wanted to hear them, but lucky for me, and I talked about this in a previous video, was Triumvirate Live in New York 1974 also had bonus tracks that had, I believe, were the same songs on there. So I did eventually get to listen to them from that. the EMI version of Spartacus actually had 2 songs on it. One being a live version of The Capital of Power, which is a great live version. It's extremely clean. I wonder where the rest of that concert is. And a very pop type song, which is called Showstopper. But to have this deluxe edition, very rare, I will never open it. In a previous video, I gave a brief history of UK. UK being one of my favorite bands because they were a super group with some of my favorite musicians, John Wetton, Eddie Jobson, Alan Holdsworth, and Bill Bruford. And I talked about how between the first and second album, they lost Bruford and Holdsworth, and they picked up Terry Bozzio on drums. Well, their last album was actually a live album that I talked about, Night After Night. And this is a fantastic live album, but it only features the 3-member iteration of the band. So what if you want to hear all 4 original members? They actually do have some recordings out there of that, and this one being live in Boston 1978. And this is a Japanese version that I picked up and actually just recently looked for it, and you can't find it anywhere. The listing on Amazon is now gone. So this would probably be very difficult to find, at least this version. So I will never open that. However, the silver lining being that there's actually a more accessible version out there called Alive in America, which is the same exact concert. And I picked this up very cheaply, and I haven't opened it up yet. I'll probably talk about it in a future episode. But I'm definitely going to listen to this. And this features not only songs from their first album, but it actually has 3 songs from their second album, which is Carrying No Cross, Caesar's Palace Blues, and The Only Thing She Needs. So it's going to be really interesting to hear the 4-member version of those songs that they ultimately recorded with 3 members. So very excited about these early versions. Do you have any CDs that you won't open? Let me know in the comments section below. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. So, what if I had an 11th album I wouldn't open? What would it be? Well, definitely Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Love Beach. Why wouldn't I open it? I just don't feel like it. Album, they lost Wetton. It was Wetton.